Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Orchestrate a Successful S4 Migration with SAP Best Practices and SAP Signavio. You'll get a recording of this webinar in a couple of days. As we go forward today, if you have questions, you can enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We've left time at the end of this so that we can answer all of your questions. And finally, you'll receive a very brief survey at the end of this, and we would love it if you could take 30 seconds or so to provide feedback to us. I'll now hand this over to Scott Bennett from VEA.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today of how to orchestrate a successful S4 migration with SAP Best Practices and SAP Signavio. We'll start today with an introduction of our speakers. Then we'll begin to talk about business process excellence and using SAP Best Practices to drive an end-to-end value lifecycle for process excellence within your organization, and using these best practices to accelerate design and configuration with your implementation of S/4HANA. We'll then talk about a specific customer experience using best practices for excellence in SAP. They developed some common views to ensure business and system integrator alignment, and also compared best practices to drive existing and future designs. Next, we'll continue with process governance and talk about how workflows can drive process ownership and governance capabilities within your organization. And we'll finish our presentation with a discussion of the full life cycle of process intelligence, including analysis, monitoring, and optimization. Your speakers for today will include myself, Zach Bennett, the CEO and Chief Architect of Visual Enterprise Architecture, and JP Asanshi, the Ecosystem Evangelist and Principal Solution Architect for SAP Signavio. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank SAP for the presentation and support today. Visual Enterprise Architecture has been around for more than 25 years. We specialize in business process management and business process excellence. We also deliver IT portfolio management services, enterprise architecture, and software product development with our research and development team in India. Our strategic expertise spans a variety of industries, from pharma and life sciences, banking, insurance, energy utilities, technology, consumer products, government, military. We've had a lot of experience across a broad range of industries, and we're spread throughout North America as well as India. At VEA, our competitive advantage is we advise our clients on performing successful business transformations. This includes business process excellence solutions, enabling a cultural change in the organization for long-term process ownership, and more importantly, we deliver value by reducing the costs of process improvements over the long term. Our journey with SAP actually began back in 2006. We've enabled more than 60 or so clients for SAP in the last 16 years. We have some deep experience in the SAP ecosystem, and we really understand the long-term vision for SAP customer success. This journey to customer success usually begins by fully understanding the business process intelligence solutions from SAP and SAP Signavio. In a best case scenario, you should begin your journey with SAP Process Insights. This allows you to fully understand your existing configuration and implementation of business processes so that you can analyze key opportunities for improvement before you begin your transformation project. SAP Process Insights can be deployed very easily and yields a number of immediate results with some out-of-the-box predefined content for SAP ERP and S/4HANA, as well as several hundred process performance indicators to help you understand where to narrow your focus and identify those opportunities for improvement. SAP Signavio Process Manager lets you model your business processes quickly and intuitively. You can identify these processes and collaborate with others in your organization across the entire process portfolio. Once you can represent your processes and there's a common understanding or shared perspective on these processes, it enables you to respond to opportunities to enable process change, increase your productivity, reduce your costs, but more importantly, to enable continuous improvement throughout your business transformation, both before, during, and after you complete your transition to S/4HANA. With SAP Signavio Process Governance, You can really own your enterprise processes. The service and solution capabilities provided by SAP Signavio enable you to deploy workflows and easily configure collaborative improvement. You can actually visualize and ensure alignment between the business, IT, and your system integrator, or your internal SAP teams if need be as well. This allows you to really gain visibility into the ownership of processes and how they're being reviewed and approved throughout the entire transformation lifecycle. SAP Signavio Process Intelligence provides a flexible framework for you to investigate your processes in detail and generate dynamic visualizations to really truly understand what goes on at your organization within each and every line of business. Business processes can be continually improved using process intelligence and ensuring that after you actually complete your implementation, you can enable monitoring and optimization for your transformation projects. And JP will talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. This also includes further improvement actions with some best practice comparisons. The Collaboration Hub from SAP Signavio ensures you can promote process excellence across the entire company. It's a single source for decision makers for information about process information, for easier to understand updates to the processes for all of your stakeholders. And it's really a 360-degree view of your landscape, documentation, analysis, and all the key metrics from your process portfolio. To complete the full life cycle of business process intelligence, SAP also offers process automation. It lets you build with simplicity, automate faster deployments. Once you discover all these issues during your process modeling, your process governance, and your process intelligence, as well as the initial information provided through SAP Process Insights, you can leverage some of their built-in AI capabilities for closer integration and to your application lifecycle and handing over a lot of these automation requirements into the business technology platform. So those are all the key elements of the business process intelligence solutions from SAP. And let's now take a closer look at how best practices from SAP can really enable you to accelerate your transformation. And we'll give some specific references from one of our emerging biotechnology companies that managed to significantly improve their ability to transform into S/4HANA. So I've gone ahead and logged into the SAP Signavio Collaboration Hub. We actually call our Collaboration Hub the VEA Process Excellence Portal. And for the purposes of our demonstration today, you see we've put together a number of key areas that we'd like to walk through and talk a little bit more about in detail. In our particular Collaboration Hub, we have references to our enterprise process framework, programs and projects, our specific content development for client development, our process governance processes, process intelligence, our reference framework for SCORE, the supply chain operating reference model, and also our SAP best practices. So I'll go ahead and continue along here by selecting our SAP best practices. And here you'll see that we've managed to collect a lot of the existing SAP best practices into a number of categories. Within the SAP best practices library, there are currently hundreds and hundreds of existing processes that SAP provides for your review and for you to use in your implementation and your upgrade to S/4HANA. What I like to do is actually go and navigate down to each of these categories of the best practices library. For our demonstration today and for your detailed review, I'd actually like to walk down into a procure-to-pay process. In this case, we're going to be selecting the procurement of materials. As I said, this is one of many hundreds of processes that SAP makes available. We've gone ahead and just made some design enhancements so that this model is a little bit easier for us to communicate the end-to-end capabilities within SAP Signavio. But you'll see it is represented within a common notation or BPMN. And let's go ahead and navigate directly down to the process itself so we can visualize the specific details. So in our experience in working with one of our clients, the pharmaceutical client we referenced in this presentation, they were able to use a lot of the existing content, and this really served as a foundation for the review and approval by not only the business SMEs, but also the system integrator. This is just an example. They actually selected some different processes, but we really wanted to communicate or demonstrate how this can add tremendous value. Not every step included within this process was relevant to their specific configuration and the requirements of their organization, but they were able to review each and every one of these best practices to drive better collaboration between the business and system integrator. Now, they were able to take this process and actually create their own customer version of the process. Now, let me show you exactly what they were able to do in developing this version of the procurement of materials. I will go ahead and navigate a little higher in our process repository, and you'll see that there's two versions of this J45 procurement of materials process. One is the original best practice, and the other is the customer version that's been created and represents more specific content for their needs and requirements. You'll notice that in the customer version of the process, they've made some significant changes. Not only have they simplified the process to meet their needs, but they've identified that there are certain roles identified in the best practices that weren't really relevant to them as an organization. Only by seeing this process together with the individual stakeholders were they really able to come to a common understanding. And one of the most interesting takeaways that we had, both with VEA and with our customer experience, is that in subsequent workshops and work streams where they continued to use best practices as a reference, they really did experience significant efficiencies in the amount of time, resources that were required to effectively capture and agree upon a common process. It, of course, varied between lines of business, but we began to see rates of efficiency of 30, 35, 40% or greater in the amount of reduction in the amount of time that was required to capture processes. And there are some significant additional benefits. As part of this process, we were also able to identify additional information that was very relevant for our project. One of the capabilities that Signavio has is the layering of additional information. So I'll go ahead and zoom into this process a little bit more, and you'll see that towards the end of the process, we've captured some critical elements. Not only have we identified priority for several of the key steps within the procurement of materials process, we were able to identify them as having different levels of different priorities, high and low, or high and medium in this case. And additionally, we were able to capture there are automation candidates or opportunities for RPA here along all three of these steps within the process. So again, this capability or enablement between the different stakeholders within your transformation project provides this common perspective. Here's this entire process from end to end, and it doesn't really matter where you are in your journey. The objective should be to focus your attention on using the tools and capabilities from SAP Signavio to deliver value. There's always resistance to the effort it may take to capture dozens, hundreds, or more processes within your organization. But the long-term value of completing the process capture in an effective way sets a strong foundation for you to drive value later. You either do the work now, or you may suffer some consequences or have negative consequences in your next set of implementations and within your transformation journey. One of the things that best practices brings to the table is really to identify elements of your processes where you may in the past have had custom development, and those configurations can now be replaced with standard processes. You also really want to focus your attention on prioritization of where improvements can drive value, and non-differentiating processes should probably be lower on that priority list. But The ability to identify common processes globally, identify variations and exceptions within your processes really can change your culture of practice for not only for your system implementation and your transition into S/4HANA, but each and every subsequent initiative, effort, or requirement you may have to improve the processes within your organization to make them more efficient and to reduce your time to implementation. Now, one of the additional capabilities with SAP Signavio is the ability to compare different versions of processes to identify and visualize the changes from one process to another. So we began with our procurement of materials best practice from SAP. We've gone ahead and created a customer version for procurement of materials and identified some of these key opportunities for improvement. But let's go ahead and actually compare those two processes to see the specific differences. I'm going to go ahead and navigate from our collaboration hub into the process manager itself. And here I'm going to go ahead and execute a search for the processes that we just described, these J45 processes. So I'll go ahead and bring them up. And what I'm able to do is actually select these two processes and perform a comparison. So this is actually performed by selecting compare revisions or diagrams. And what you'll see in the view that's generated is a clear representation of the original process and also what has been changed as part of the customer version. This is really some great functionality. You are presented with a variety of options. You can elect to show different things about when you're comparing these processes, changes in individual steps, whether they're added or removed, changes in the lanes, and here the BPMN diagram, when roles are added or removed. In this example, they actually removed a couple of the roles in the client process. Information or specific attributes about each and every step. And what I find to be one of the more revealing parts of this functionality is as you begin to walk through the process, they've got some synchronized scrolling here, which really lets you present back to all the interested stakeholders, whether it's those that are designing the process from the business side, system integrators that are trying to gain alignment and consensus around how the process should look, and any other stakeholders or subject matter experts that are involved in this process. So each and every change to the process can be correctly captured. And the full life cycle of using all these SAP Signavio capabilities begin with process design and capturing the process, begin with comparing that process to best practices and developing a new customer process that is a shared perspective among each of the participants. But there are really some additional capabilities that SAP Signavio brings to the table, and some that our customer is now looking at implementing this quarter, and that involves process governance. And process governance, most importantly, is a huge enabler of process ownership. So how do you succeed with process governance and facilitating process ownership at your organization? Most importantly, you really have to understand who the stakeholders are. There's various different types of programs and projects, and depending upon what your solution is, you have a number of different roles that participate. The key objective should be ensuring alignment between the business stakeholders, IT, and your system integrator. Or as I mentioned earlier, you may have your own SAP development teams as well. And it's important that everyone is really on the same page. Different types of projects have different requirements, but SAP Signavio can really deliver an effective governance solution by ensuring that all the different stakeholders have a say in reviewing and approving the processes during the design phase to ensure that prior to the final configuration, everyone has agreed on how the processes should operate. These are just some examples of the different types of roles and internal organizations we've been involved with, whether it's large enterprise SAP implementations or upgrades, working with business transformation teams. They used to be called continuous improvement teams, and some still are. Digital transformation teams, the Business Process Center of Excellence, quality and risk management, and also participating in various business process programs and projects with all different roles across all elements of the organization. So now let's talk in detail about how Signavio process governance actually enables these review and approval workflows. Within SAP Signavio's process governance, we're going to show an example of a two-step approval process. The first step in the process is actually having someone design and submit the model for approval. This can usually happen from internal teams, and we've also played a significant role in helping to facilitate workshops and collect information about processes in a consistent fashion. The next step is to take this process and actually submit it for approval. In this example, we're using a process expert or SME, subject matter expert, but in some cases we've also seen this role played by the system integrator to ensure that the process is designed in a way that's consistent with both the business and the subject matter experts. The next step is actually performing the second approval of this process, and that is usually done by the business process owner. This ensures alignment up and down everyone that's involved in the project or the transformation of each and every one of these processes. The fourth step in this process is to actually publish the enterprise process to the collaboration hub. This is performed by Signavio Process Governance. Here you'll see that highlighted that each and every one of these activities is managed as a service by Process Governance to easily facilitate this workflow from end to end. Design, review, approval, communication, and publishing out to the enterprise portal for everyone in the organization involved in the project to have access, review, and communicate in an effective fashion. Governance is probably one of the most important pieces of being successful with your transformation journey. You have to have everyone agree on the processes and facilitate owners and ownership of those processes. Therefore, as you move beyond your initial transformation project, you can facilitate an environment and enable these capabilities for process owners to continuously make changes in an effective fashion by understanding exactly what those processes are and how they work. For my final topic today, I'd also like to talk a little bit more about achieving process excellence and what are the value drivers and what that brings to the organization. In the past, SAP Signavio has commissioned quite an extensive study around significant value drivers for business process excellence, achieving maturity with business process management. We have a lot of experience at VEA in achieving the same types of results across programs, projects, and with clients that span multiple years in their journey to business transformation. Now, the nature of these benefits does differ greatly depending upon, the size of your organization, the scope of your SAP implementation, the number of processes, not only your portfolio, but within the scope of your implementation, the number of business stakeholders you may have in different entities or lines of business that are involved. But one thing we've seen for sure in our experience is that the value drivers and the benefits derived from business process excellence really escalate over time. They are not incremental. They do magnify the longer you are able to extend this capability, and also the organization has so many benefits from expediting your ability to make changes and reducing the life cycle from design, configuration to implementation. So we've managed to walk through some of the core capabilities of business process excellence using SAP Signavio, but this isn't the full story. In fact, I'd now like to hand over to JP, who's going to talk a little bit more about process intelligence and how we complete each and every one of these capabilities to deliver a real end-to-end solution for business process excellence. So JP, why don't you go ahead and take control and take it away?
Thanks a lot, Zach. Thanks a lot. So let me share my screen. And once again, thanks a lot for joining, right? So let me share that. So I guess everything is okay now. Perfect. Okay, so thanks a lot, Zach, for the presentation. So I really like the flow of the presentation where we saw how our SAP Signavio Process Transformation Suite helps at different stages of a transformation. So we saw process modeling, process simulation, comparison, communication, and collaboration at scale, thanks to the governance. So now let's bring process mining as part of this equation, right? So I'm going to walk you through a very short demonstration of how process mining can help us to lead a data-driven approach, but also to be used as a continuous approach. So in order to show you that, actually, I'm going to restart exactly at the point where Zach was presenting the P2P process. So I am into the SAP Signavio Collaboration Hub, as you can see here, and I've got my BPMN diagram. And as you notice, BPMN diagram is something where I can consume the information. But let's be clear, and let's be honest. At this point, there is nobody or nothing that can prove that this process is exactly the way it is executed in the real life. And that's exactly what process mining brings on in the table, right? Because here what we do is we actually associate our P2P process that has been designed, mapped, imported into the repository, and we associate to this modeling, this diagram, process mining, right? So I don't want to dive too much into the detail for now, right? But obviously I have a lot to say about process mining, but just before, I need to start with the beginning, right? How we collect this information. And I'm convinced that plenty of you have this question and say, that's great that you are showing me all these very nice discovery pictures, but how you connect with the source system, how does that work? So glad you asked. Let's start with that. So when you are using SAP Signavio process intelligence, the very first thing is to connect with the data source. So we've got different ways to make it happen, right? So the very first thing is we can use either our out-of-the-box connectors, right? So if, for instance, you are using SAP ECC, S4, ServiceNow, so it's not only SAP technology, it's actually broader than that. We can help you to connect with the source system and transform the data. But you can also use our own ETL. So the idea here is being able to connect, create your connection, right? By detecting the data source. As soon as you've got the data source, you can pick and choose the process you want to go in, right? And this system is going to help you not only to connect with the data source, but also take over the transformation for you. As soon as it is done, you will have the ability to get the full picture of what system you are connected in, and you can have multiple systems. And once again, I do insist, they can be SAP and non-SAP system. You've got the transformation, so the way we map the source system and the data with actually the way to create a data set. And very nice here, SAP Signavio Process Intelligence is showing you how the process works and also what are the different business objects that are manipulated, right? So if you want to drill down to understand how it has been transformed, etc., you can always drill down into the business object and see the type of transformation we've done. That is great. We connect with the source, we ensure the transformation, but as you know, and I started the presentation with that, it's not a one-shot exercise. What we want is to make sure that we can connect this configuration into our pipeline, because we may want to run this exercise every day, every week, every quarter, right? Process mining is not a one-shot type of exercise. It's something which is rolling, continuous. So we started with this baseline. Now we know how to connect with the information. So we've got access to all that. Now let me walk you through what process mining is bringing on the table, right? So the very first thing, you remember, we spoke about the process modeling and the BPMN diagram. This is what we think the process is doing. But with process mining now, we can really see how it is executed thanks to the data. So what you have here is actually what we call process discovery. So based on the information that we have imported, and now we can see what are the different steps. And we always start with what we call the happy path. So in other words, what is the most popular way to execute my P2P process? Not based on guesswork or opinion or feeling, this is really based on the data. And if I really want to understand how this P2P process works, I can start adding, activities that don't belong to my happy path. And bit by bit, I will be able to see the complexity of my P2P process. Not on people's mind, not on opinion, no, based on the data. And more I'm adding activities and paths, more I can see how complex it is, right? And as you can see, bit by bit, I can see my process, the way it is executed, right? From creating the purchase requisition, right, to the PO, and then bit by bit, see how things are happening. Something interesting is that beyond discovering the process based on the data, you can now select any type of this object and apply filters. And that's exactly what we do in order to detect, and create correlation. So for instance, let's say here, we know based on a couple of information that we are paying some invoices without any check, right? So we want to click on these specific activities and maybe ask our system to filter all of the investigation based on some pass, some variant where we don't have any check invoice, right? And automatically that's going to apply a filter, right? And all of the different widgets is going to be now updated based on this filter. So that will help us to understand how things are impacting the rest, okay? So I'm going to just remove that for the sake of the demonstration, right? And to come back to my entire P2P process. So beyond the discovery, which is very nice because that helps us to actually run some brainstorming and discussion by applying some filters, you can scroll down and have access to what we call widgets, right? So widgets are metrics that you can manipulate, create, that will help you to use the data to tell a story. So you can have very basic widgets, for instance, like this, where you can use the out-of-the-box, features and function to take different fields and apply some mathematical functions such as, as the average, the max, etc. But you can also play with your own rules. What I mean by that is you can apply signal language. So signal language is kind of an SQL-like type of language where you can build your own metrics. So for instance, here, I want to check the process compliance, right? I want to make sure that I can count how many variants of the process are not respecting the flow that I have defined. So I can actually build this widget by using signal code. And if you're not very inspired and you want to reuse some metrics that already exist, we also have a library. So it means that you can now tap into a library of metrics that you can reuse. So let me show you how it works. So here we can go to new metric, right? Add metric from library. And now based on the process or based on the topic, right? We can, for instance, here go to rework, right? And select the different metrics we want to reuse into our specific context, right? So for instance, here, I may want to see and identify the rework I've got into my P2P process. I just have to click right on the one I want. And that's going to automatically retrieve these metrics into my environment. And based on that, I can even check them, add, customize them if necessary. But they become available to me into my process investigation, right? So you can either use the basic widget based on the out-of-the-box features. You can build your own with some signal programming, or you can tap into our library of metrics, right? So that helps you to build this type of widgets to tell you everything you should know about your P2P process. So the non-compliance, the number of invoices that have been paid without any check, right? The invoices or the PO according to the country. So you can play with the widget to shed light on the reality, right? So as another point that I would like to show you, and which is also the magic of putting business process analysis and process mining together, you can have this type of juxtaposition, right? And I just want to insist on one thing. You are not obliged to capture a BPMN diagram, but if you have a BPMN diagram, that's great, because now you will be able to use it as a background and use process mining to juxtapose how the process is executed in the real life. I personally like this type of representation because even if you speak with some people that are not process experts or IT experts, they're going to get what's going on here. Because on the right-hand side, you can see the different variants for this P2P process. You can filter them by cycle time, by type of suppliers, by geographies, etc. And bit by bit, you can select the different variant and see what's happening. So in red, just to remind you, it's what's happening coming from the process mining, so the data-driven approach. And what you see on the background is what other teams have designed and what they think the process is all about. So now we can see, for instance, that for this specific variant, where we are speaking about a lot of cases, that starts directly with the PO, right? But more importantly, we see that we've got some friction at this specific step, right? So if we actually change the view, we can see that we've got a lot of time spent, right, into this specific area. And even more importantly, you see one specific task, which is called reassign. believe it or not, we didn't even know about this task. What I mean by that is when we did the process modeling and process analysis exercise, nobody brought this, right? But process mining did. Process mining realized that as part of the sequence, we've got a task which is called reassign that helped me to actually reassign the invoice to the right person. That can have huge impact. So for instance, if we are not even aware of this task and there is no business rules associated to that, what does that mean? That's maybe an intern, right, can check and validate an invoice. So that typically what process mining is bringing on the table is, beyond opinion, facts, guesswork, right? We are bringing the two worlds together to show you exactly how it works, right? The last point I would like to bring your attention on is this ability to, based on the data-driven approach and the process discovery, right, we can select different variants we are interested in. So for instance, we can filter the process variant coming from one specific country for all the different invoices, above 10 million, right? And that will help you to narrow down the different variants you are interested in, right? And as soon as you have created this filter, now you can ask SAP Signavio Process Intelligence to retrieve, to translate this process discovery back into a BPMN diagram. The beginning of the story that Zach was telling you at the start of this session. Now, believe me, this diagram has been generated automatically, okay? So we use the data coming from process mining. We apply a filter just to make sure we narrow down the type of variants we want to spare our time on. And we did ask the platform to turn that into an actionable BPMN diagram. As soon as we've got this diagram, it's stored into the central repository. So it means it is fully eligible to process simulation, process comparison, communication, collaboration, governance, everything that Zach showed you before, right? So the last thing I would like to bring you, which is a new feature of the platform, is when we are consuming all these very nice dashboards, metric, and so on, we have the ability to create some insight. What I mean by that is if, for instance, we see something which is kind of shocking, right? We have the ability to create an insight just to make sure we pinpoint, if you will, say, hey, based on the analysis we have run, there is an issue, right? Or maybe there is something here where we want to improve. And that's going to create an insight associated to one specific widget. You associate that usually to a value driver, and you assign this insight to somebody to the team. That will help you to have a collection of insights that can be either manual or they can even be automatic. So let me show you that, which is quite nice because it's fully leveraging AI. So the concept here is I can click on this insight and I can see all the collection that I've created, right, manually. But I can also ask the system to generate insight, automated insights based on correlations, based on information that have been retrieved from the process mining exercise. And here, some may not be relevant, some may be very relevant. And you always have the choice to save the insight or directly add this specific automated insight to your investigation, right? So for instance, that's gonna do the work for you to create correlation between, for instance, the invoice amount with the discount amount, right? Or for instance, the relationship between the lack of invoice check with a specific supplier, right? So all this is going to be done for you automatically with this automated insight, right? So that was pretty much what I wanted to cover in less than 10 minutes about how process mining play an important role as part of the process transformation journey here. And if now I think it's a good time to open for Q&A, right? Zach and Candace, I think we are right in time.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
Yeah, JP.
That's great. Thanks to both of you. We do have a few questions. And as I mentioned at the outset, if you have more questions as we go through this next few minutes, you can put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We'll start with the first one. Peter asks, how do you fit within the RISE framework? I think that's great for you, JP, to start.
Yeah, that's a very important question.
That's
right?
definitely yours.
So let me give you a high-level answer on this. So as you probably know, if you are evolving into the SAP ecosystem, right, we've got this mission, right? this mission to bring our customers, with the help of our partners, right, to become intelligent and sustainable enterprise. So see that as a North Star, right? RISE is the vehicle, S/4HANA is the foundation, and in this specific case, SAP Signavio is the catalyst. Because at the end of the day, that's truly the only end-to-end solution that's going to help you to provide key capabilities at any step of the transformation, from the very beginning to define the why, to map with some value drivers, with different personas, to analyze the current state by using process mining, for instance, map with some best practices, build a business case, right? Use governance to make sure we validate this business case, and then we run the transformation with solution manager or CALM, right? And obviously, as soon as we have delivered on time, on budget, and on quality, because this is what we strive to do, right? I was about to say it's only the beginning. What I mean by that is we want to move from a seamless transformation, so that's the RISE vehicle, to continuous improvements, right? So if you will, the SAP Signavio suite, with the help of our partners, is at the start, during, and even after the RISE vehicle. So I hope it makes sense.
Thank you, JP. The next question, I think, Zach, this will be great for you. Susan asks, how do you plan to extend the best practices repository into different areas going forward?
I think, JP, we could probably both answer this one. I know there's several hundred processes there now, and you probably can talk a little bit more about what the future holds for the availability of that content.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm pretty sure most of you guys know that we already have a huge library of best practices, right? So whatever the system you are using, so we've got best practices for success factors, ECC, S4, right? So we've got all these BPM and diagrams ready to go, ready to be imported, and that's exactly what Zach was mentioning. So it's been a couple of months that we have heavily invested into this concept of content, right? And the content won't be limited to process best practices. We speak about, capability maps, we speak about value drivers, etc. So this is something we're going to announce in the very next weeks, right? So the concept is putting the content, right, and best practices at the center as a baseline, just to make sure that nobody is reinventing the wheel. But that's also a guarantee that you can customize these best practices. Okay, so see that as a template, see that as a baseline, but we will always rely, on our partners to also bring their own IP. So it could be industry. So I saw that there was a question at the beginning about, do you have any best practices on the fashion industry, right? That typically is a case where our partner can bring some content and help us to elaborate. But I don't want to tell too much on it, right? Because it's going to be a big announcement in the next few weeks.
That's great. Thanks, JP. Pramod asks, how easily can we incorporate custom data such as Z tables on BPDs?
So this is actually something that you use with our ETL, right? So when we've got some transformation, features that can help you to collect all the information, right, from the source system, including your customization, directly to our process mining tool, right? So that you will be able to detect this into the process discovery that I showed you just before. And they're also totally part of the scope when you do your customization. So I showed you very quickly, right, the table of transformation. So that's totally applicable here, right? I also saw, if I may, Candace, the question of testing scenarios, right? So I try to go quick, right, because we don't have a lot of time. So we have the ability to test different scenarios on both the process simulation, right? So we've got an embedded simulation engine that helps you to play with the cost, the resource consumption, the time, right? And any simulation that you are running, you can extract this into an Excel spreadsheet. So that's for the process simulation, but we can also simulate decision, right? Because we do support DMN, decision modeling notation. So if you want to have different business rules and to test the output, this is definitely something that we can do as well. Sorry, I'm looking the other screen. So do you have any other point on your side, Zach?
No, I think that we're able to really tie together, the full life cycle story about what SAP Signavio brings to the table for business process excellence. If you really want to succeed with your transformation, you must facilitate this culture of process excellence and process ownership. And I think that's a message we'll continue to promote and facilitate in our engagements and in our partnership with you and SAP.
Thanks. Thanks a lot for your time. And it just displays the slide with your contact details, right? For those who
Thank you,
don't.
JP. Much appreciated. That's always a great way to finish.
Good.
So we appreciate again. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, JP, for always for participating and delivering today's presentation with me. Much appreciated.
No problem.
And thank you to both of you, JP and Zach at VEA. This is we hope that you found this very, very informative. We do have a couple of questions that we didn't quite have time for, so that we'll get back to you separately. So thank you again for joining us today. We hope that you found the webinar informative. As mentioned at the beginning, please take a minute when you exit to complete the short survey so we may continue improving our webinars for you. And as I also mentioned, you'll receive a recording of this webinar within a couple of days. So thank you all very much again for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.